week is that the Supreme Court made the decision to block a federal moratorium that actually halted evictions across the country during the pandemic. And this gave the landlords the right to resume the eviction process, despite obviously tenants being impacted by the pandemic. We know people might have lost their jobs, might have trouble getting jobs. They might be sick, so they can't work. All sorts of things. And so I remember this week on my social media, I was asking friends what they thought about it, and getting different opinions, and like it actually was sort of split. And there's a more complex story here. And so today we have a guest to help us break that down. T, you want to introduce the guest?
Yes, shout out to my guy Orlando Wesley. Y'all might remember from the episode when he broke down kind of what was going on with Robin Hood and the game. What was it? What's the name? GameStop. Yeah, GameStop stock went up. So he kind of broke down the whole situation. So he has a very informed perspective on a lot of things especially when it comes to business. So Orlando, I just want to give you a floor real quick, introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into the topic.
All right, so my name's Orlando, as you guys know. I can't remember the exact episode, but I do thank you guys for having me again. It's always a good feeling to be on this show. So with that, let's get to it.
Okay, cool. So first, we just want to kind of kick off and talk about what the eviction moratorium is, and then we want to just kind of pitch our different perspectives on it. So first, I just want to talk about the eviction moratoriums, what they are. So they were a pause in evictions since the pandemic has started. It was actually started, I believe, by the CDC. Thinking about eviction as a public health concern. So when we think about it, like in the middle of a pandemic, that is, as contagious as it was, and it's hard to kind of predict how it's going to go and how it's going to spread. Evictions during that time, we think about that as a public health concern, because if a family is evicted, it'll lead to this family having to go to friends' house and family's house and essentially couch surf, which would increase the exposure to a lot of people of this virus. So that's why the CDC was involved, because that was originally my first question, why this would start. But we also understand that a lot of people lost their jobs during the pandemic. So there are a lot of people that we think of that lost their jobs, though across all fields and all I guess salary types, all tax brackets, people lost their jobs. But I think the most affected people were low income individuals. So today we kind of want to, I guess, pose a debate in a way, kind of pose you both sides of the coin, and kind of like how we can work to find some solutions. So with the eviction moratorium coming up, there's an estimated 1.2 households that are very likely to face eviction for non-payment and we'll see this over the next 2 months. It'll increase a few more million once California, New York, and Illinois, places that have very big cities, when their state, because this is a federal thing, the Supreme Court stopped the federal eviction moratoriums, but what we understand about federalism is some states have different laws that can provide protection for people. So I want to give the floor to Orlando real quick to kind of talk about this from a homeowner perspective, as someone that would like to own homes in the future, that is planning on doing this as an investor. Why this may be let's say a negative thing for homeowners, because when we think about the eviction moratorium, of course we don't want people kicked out on the street. So I want to pose y'all, I want Orlando to pose y'all why he thinks that this could still be a good thing.
A good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I guess a good thing for homeowners, like why the eviction moratorium ending could be something beneficial for homeowners.
Okay, I see. So the reason why I think that it could be good for homeowners is because a lot of the landlords in the United States are mainly actually mom and pop landlords. And so the ones who are actually the most affected by this are those mom and pop landlords. Like the corporations, they're not really feeling the brunt of people not paying rent. But where the people who are feeling it are those people who are own 1, 2, 3, 4 properties, and let's say one person's not paying, that's like 25, 30% of their income that
Mhm.
they're missing. So those ones are the ones that are feeling it like the worst, because just because your tenant's not paying rent doesn't mean that you got to stop, that you get a pause on your mortgage. There is forbearance options out there, but let's say that your tenant never catches back up all that rent. That means that the homeowner pretty much has to pocket all those costs or eat them all, and go on about their day, while the tenant kind of gets to walk free. And then another part I wanted to go over about that is that as like a mom and pop landlord, the absolute last resort is a eviction. Most of them don't even want to do eviction. Usually it's like last resort, because evictions are super expensive, they're time consuming, and you got to go through the courts to do them. So
Mhm.
most of the time homeowners don't even want them to do it. So this eviction moratorium ending will actually have like a super positive effect on like the smaller mom and pop landlords. It's not really going to affect the corporations, because most, they're collecting most of their rent, but even if they don't collect the rent, they have the resources necessary to just evict a bunch of people, and they don't even care.
Mhm. Okay. And so, do you know? I mean, this is just a genuine question. Do mom and pop like homeowners make up the majority of the market, or is it mostly corporations?
Oh, it's definitely mom and pop. Yeah, I've done a bunch of research on this, and I think it's like 80% of like the rental market is owned by mom and pop landlords or something like that.
Mhm.
So it's just a bunch of small mom and pop landlords who own, 1 to 10 houses. Or I think they classify it as if you own 20 or less units that you're a mom and pop landlord.
20 or less units?
It's either 10 or 20. I can't remember the number off the top of my head.
But okay, will we really consider someone that owns 10 units of something mom and pop? Because
Yeah,
that uh, okay.
definitely. I
Wow.
have an old coworker who owns, I think, like 12 units. I mean, 3 multifamily houses are 12 units right there.
So was that like an apartment complex?
Not necessarily a complex. So you can buy like a basically a 4 unit apartment building. So if you think about apartments,
Mhm.
um, some of them have like 4 units per building. Some might have 6 or 8, depending upon how tall they go and how many stories they are. But the most normal, or I guess the average multifamily, is usually going to be like a triplex or a fourplex. And so
Mhm.
if you own 2 or 3 of those, then you're still considered like a mom and pop landlord.
Okay. So how much might that person that we or that you personally know be worth? You might not know exactly, but like let's give a guesstimation.
Maybe worth like a few 100,000, like 300,000, 400,000 net worth.
Okay. Okay. And how much do you think he's bringing in off of those properties?
Mm, I'd say rent on those properties would probably be like, let's say 1,000 a unit, so like 12K a month, and then
So,
their mortgage is probably like 7,000 a month on all 3 of them put together.
mm, so they're bringing up over just a little bit of profit over the mortgage?
Oh, definitely. But there's also other expenses besides just your mortgage and stuff that you got to cover. So a lot of them have to cover, like if your AC goes out, or I don't know,
Mm,
whoever's like renting out there. Anytime something goes wrong with your apartment, you always call the landlord, and then they have to fix it. So there's a bunch of little like miscellaneous expenses that happen all the time that they got to cover. And so if one person's not paying their rent, or if multiple people aren't paying their rent, you got to cover your mortgage payment, and then you also have to cover all of the expenses that are going on around the property, the maintenance, ACs if they go out, stuff like that. And it
okay.
gets worse the lower the number of units you own. So if it's like a house and somebody's not paying your rent for that house, your whole income stream is gone, but you're still paying that mortgage and HOAs and all types of other fees.
Okay. And that puts those individual homeowners at a disadvantage.
Right.
Okay. Well, and I think that that's so important to kind of think about because my initial because we have these conversations, right? And you provide me with a perspective that I don't initially like think of, right? Because for me, it's like the first thing I think of is like housing is a human right. And I know a lot of people, and I guess how we really live life is not really positioned that way. We don't see housing as a human right. We kind of prioritize profits over people. So when I see something like this is the first impression I'm having. I think
Right.
of the low income people that will be affected by this, that are often affected by evictions more than anything. Like, as someone that has been in a situation that has been evicted before, like as a family, I can understand how traumatic that can be. Like, as a kid, you don't really understand that. You like, no, nah, this is my home. This is my house. Like, these are my friends live. This is where I go to school. All of those things change when you get evicted. You're literally uprooted, like, and you have to pack whatever you can and just kind of get out. You lose. Like, I lost my fat heads that I had on the wall, stuff like that, right? Like, stuff that, like, I feel like fundamentally made my home, like my house, my home, right? So I think that those are things that you can't put a value on. That, yes, some people are losing money, but it's like a peace of mind that you almost don't have. It's like, now that you're a homeowner and that you have a home, you're establishing something for your child. Now imagine if it, like, if something were to happen, y'all would have to up and leave and just move somewhere else and just kind of hop couch to couch off of, I guess, I think of situations or things that you can't really control. Like, some people got furloughed from their jobs. Some people got laid off. Some people got straight up fired, right? Some people are woefully underpaid. We think about the minimum wage nationwide, and how that, we know that a minimum wage, people can't live on that anymore, right? So I do think that there were options. There was unemployment and different things like that, but maybe you stayed in your job and you just get paid an abysmal amount, and you didn't. I mean, it's kind of scary to quit your job and kind of take unemployment, right? So it's like, I think some people were still in a bad position. Or, I mean, I even think about like hourly workers. I think that this one really affects hourly workers a lot, or people that work. I think of barbers and different things like this. Somebody was talking about how they were a barber and they couldn't work for 3 weeks because they had COVID. And he was like, hey, I mean, like, I wanted to come in, but I kept testing positive. I didn't really have that many side effects, but I didn't want to infect anybody. And that's actually a good person, because I know people that might even feel bad and like haven't gotten tested yet. It's like, shit, I'm going to work, man. I need to make this money. I got 7 appointments, right? Like, that's $100. So I do think, like, I really think of the CDC in that sense, because it's like, it is a public health concern. So if you know that there is a pause on evictions, we can really take the proper and necessary steps rather than kind of buying into like what you have to do for capitalism. Like, we have to pay for living, so we gotta go to work. And it's like, at the end of the day, I think that it is not the most beneficial, and it is actually the more harmful to have like this eviction status, like, I guess, allowed to go right now, rather than having a moratorium. And then I guess my last point is that I think that, like, homeowners in a way are investors. Would you agree with that homeowners are investors?
Definitely. Yeah, they're
Okay.
definitely.
Okay, so with investments, there's risk, right?
There is, but like, you can't have like I feel like the eviction moratorium is kind of like a man-made risk. Like, that's not a everyday circumstance that stands that a investor should have to deal with. Like, it's not
Mm.
their fault that, the government said, "Oh, well, we're gonna allow your tenant to not pay you, but you still have to pay the bank." It's not
Oh,
like, something crazy happened where, their tenant just said, "Oh, I'm not paying no more," and then they can get rid of them in a few months or whatever. Like, this thing's been going on for like a year and a half now.
yeah.
I think initially it was a very good idea for the first, like, let's say, like 6 to 10 months or so. Um,
Mhm.
but the moment that they started passing like all the rent reliefs and the extra added unemployment benefits and all the different stimulus checks and everything, like, I started thinking that, they need to get rid of the eviction moratorium, because now it's having like extreme negative impacts on especially places like the rental market, housing
Mm.
market. So not many people are looking at the eviction moratorium as the reason why rents are skyrocketing, but that's one of the
Uh-huh.
biggest reasons as to why rents are skyrocketing.
Wow.
Um,
Okay. Can you explain that? I didn't know that.
so normally normally throughout the year, people like move, they come and go through apartments, houses, whatever it is, like they're 1 year leases, 2 year leases. But when you start locking people up in the same place, there's not all this movement going around. But
Mhm.
let's say that there's teenagers who are turning 18, there's kids moving out of their parents' house. There's these young adults that need to start renting places. Now, because there's a limited supply of apartments on the market, because there's some apartments where, people are being locked into by not paying their rent and they don't have to leave. Now there's this like this chokehold on the supply of apartments. And
Mm,
we all know that anytime there's like a low supply of something and there's a huge demand for it, prices start skyrocketing. So now the landlords who do have open units, they can go out and charge
okay.
an arm and
Yes,
a
a
leg
lot.
for a place. Oh,
Mm,
it's insane. I seen a 2 bedroom or a 3 bedroom apartment around the corner from where I stay. 2 years ago it was going for like 1350. Now the same place is going for like 1900. And
dang.
it's only been 2 years. And it's like, damn, that big of an increase.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because there's so little apartments or houses on the market to rent, and then there's so many people who want to rent these places. And so
Mm,
now it gives the power back to the people who do have empty units. And so
okay.
that's one of the like biggest negative effects that it's having, is that the people who are looking for places, now they're getting screwed because of the people who are staying in these places for free.
Okay. That's interesting. I would have never considered that as a thing. Scholar P, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, so I see the points that both of y'all are making, and I feel like there's definitely what it seems like a gray area. And Orlando, I want you to sort of talk about this, because I feel like there are ways that, just like, people are getting, $2,000 or $1,200 stimulus checks. Is there not a way that the governments can work with these mom and pop owners, and have some type of relief for them, because they're having to experience like the brunt of people not being able to pay their rent, and they have to deal with this moratorium? It seems like, it would be some type of, thing for small businesses, or there'd be some type of caveat to help these people, while also simultaneously helping the renters. Like, does something like that exist? And how easy or how simple or how complex would it be to put something like that in place?
So they did pass like rent relief. I think Trump passed some of it back in, I think his last one was what, in like November, December,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then Joe Biden passed even more of it in
Double
March.
it. Mhm.
The problem is that, so they passed that, and what the federal government did is like they were like, we don't want to have to deal with it. So they took all the rent relief money. I think it was like 50 billion or something, and then they spread it amount. They spread it amongst the states and said, you guys have to deal with this, get this handled,
Mhm.
get this rent relief to all the landlords and all the tenants who need it. And so what the states did was they said, okay, some of them didn't want to deal with it. They passed it down to like their local municipalities and cities
Mhm.
and stuff like that, and their local governments. And then some of them have like put these crazy rules in place. So it's not that they haven't passed anything. It's just that the way that they're going about getting the relief to people is they've made it so much more complicated than it should be. They've been
Mm.
putting like I've heard of some states saying like, oh, well, you have to provide proof of, your lost job. You got to show that you lost at least 80% or something like that of your income. Like they're putting all these crazy like rules and regulations on this stuff. So it's really hard to get. I think the last time I was watching a YouTube video and some guy was talking about it. He was saying, I think as of like a week or two ago, only like $2 or $3 billion out of the 50 billion, let's say, has been used for the rental relief. And so recently, when they extended this moratorium, they did it with the purpose to try to hurry up the states to get this rental relief out, which was
Mhm.
I think it was a good idea. It's just the fact that this thing's been going on for 18 months. They should have thought about this like way in the front, kind of like the PPP loans and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
with the PPP loans, they they weren't actually letting like landlords collect that money, so they weren't considering them for it. It was like one of the things where like you can't you your business doesn't count if it's like a rental property, because PPP loans were specifically for paychecks, and it's typically not a paycheck for rental income. So the landlords were left out of that, so they didn't get none of that. And then now this rental assistance, the states and the governments and everything just been They just been putting all these crazy regulations and rules on it. So a lot of landlords are like, I don't even want it no more. I just want the person out of my place at this point.
Yeah.
Mm,
And
wow.
let me hop in there too. So and I just want to echo everything Arlander said and just add some numbers to it. So as of like 2 days ago, the New York Times had reported that only 5.1 billion out of 46.5 billion has been used so far. So even though this kind of is posed as like the renters versus the landlords, it's more like both of them versus like the federal government.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because 89% of rental assistance has not been distributed. And just like Arlander showed, like it's purely because of bureaucracy. Is bureaucracy and some barriers determined by those bureaucratic like departments, right? So like because no one wants to deal with it, they keep passing it to the next person rather than the federal government or the state working with individual landlords and their renters to just kind of get this process moving. Because I know both of them would be willing to engage in the process.
Oh yeah, that.
And there's more than enough money available. And we, just like Arlander kind of showed, it's like that money was available for unemployment. It was widely available for PPP loans for small business owners and especially corporations. So it's like you would think, because this is such a, again, public health crisis as well as like a human rights issue, that you would be trying to keep people into their homes. So I think this is really more than anything a message to the federal government, the state government, the local government, that there needs to be a better system. There needs to be care put into the system for people to really sit down and work with these homeowners and these renters and these people that want to stay in their homes, to kind of give them some care to make sure that this works out. Like, because there's no reason that the money should be available but no one could obtain it. Like I was reading about, there was one barrier where people had to have the renter and the landlord had to have active like state IDs. And it's like, dog, y'all know the DMV had been closed for the longest. And now like I had to get my vehicle registration, and my registration was a little late because I had to wait so long to get in line to get like one, because they only allow so many people to go. So it's like it's hard to get an appointment. So it's like when there are other bureaucratic barriers outside of just like this application, like I need to go through 4 other channels to even ensure that I can get this money here. Like that's really what's been the problem. So something has to be streamlined. There needs to be like a federal body working with each state to kind of get this money out because it's available. But just like Arlander said, it's like business owners will do what business owners does. And it's like when people need their money, it's like, look, instead of waiting 3 months for this money to maybe come, like I'm just gonna kick you out and get a person in here in the next 30 days, clean it up and cut my L's, right? So I think that like it's harming people in multiple ways. And I think, again, because low income people are affected at the highest rates, that the burden will fall mostly on them. So I think to answer your question, Scholar P, there is something that can be done, but it really comes down to the federal government and the state governments to kind of take the foot of the bill and really like handle and do what they're supposed to do.
They
Absolutely.
should have done like a portal or something, kind of like what they've been doing with like the PPP loans. Although they pushed the PPP loans on the banks and forced them to do it, but like they could have made some type of portal or something where, it's like a simple application process, and then, hired, I don't know, 10, 15 people to handle that portal for, I don't know how many ever months or whatever the case is. Could have been that simple, and then have those people like verifying that, this is the right tenant, the right landlord. I think what they were scared of is like the fact that they don't want to have to do it. And then that they didn't want to have to like deal with, the people trying to commit the fraud and whatnot. So,
I mean, but we know people scammed on the PPP loans, and it's like they didn't stop that, right? So it's like I feel like this is a more important issue. I feel like fraud would be so little when compared to like how much it would help, if that makes sense. So yeah. Scholar P, did you have any other questions?
No, I feel like it goes back to what you said, T, in terms of it being a conversation of not renters versus the landlords, but the the federal government, the state governments, and it's so funny because it just feels like that worker, that supervisor who doesn't want to deal with the problems, and so they create a dynamic of tension between the employees, so that the employees are upset with each other instead of dealing with the supervisor who has that ultimate power and control. And that's sort of what it feels like. It's like renters feel some way, landlords feel some way, but everyone is a victim of the mishandling of funds and systems operated by the federal and state governments. And so I think that if we realize that, then landlords and renters can actually band together and actually be on the same side, because people at the end of the day, they just want a place to stay, and they want their bills to be paid at the end of the day. And so I think that they both want the same thing. So yeah, I think that as long as we remember that, and remember that we're not necessarily fighting with against each other, but we can fight in conjunction with and in collaboration with each other, then we'll be on a better path.
Absolutely. So I just want to thank Arlander for dropping by and dropping some knowledge on us. My man is creating his own content soon, and you will be able to find it in a bunch of different places, specifically on YouTube. So I just want to throw it to him real quick, so he can lob where you can find him, at least, or when he'll start putting out content. But this man is the one to come to for Black business knowledge, and we want to highlight our experts.
Thank you. Yeah, so probably in the next month or so, we'll be making a YouTube channel. I've been kind of slacking on it. I've been writing all the scripts and everything. Now I just got to put everything together.
Okay. So what topics are you going to talk about?
Pretty much just personal finance, mindset, and just uplifting your lifestyle.
Okay, cool. So y'all stay tuned when we get a name for the channel, and where he makes some ads, some little 15-second like clips. We'll definitely plug it on the show for y'all to find. But we just want to thank you for stopping by, Arlander. We appreciate you always dropping knowledge, and we will see you soon.
All right. Thank you for having me. Appreciate you too.
All right, bro. Have a good one.